Good morning everyone, welcome back to MyTutor online school and welcome back to English. So today we're hopping back over to the literature, back over to the poetry, and we are looking at William Blake's London, which is one of my favourites. I'm super chuffed that we're doing this today. So as usual, be about 45 minutes teaching, 15 minutes questions at the end, but I've got some sort of quizzes for you guys to do whilst you're asking me questions as well. Yesterday you guys came up with some really brilliant questions and we ran over a little bit. So if you can get them in sort of sooner rather than later, we would both really appreciate that. So Bola's with us as well this morning from MyTutor. So she'll be in for the first 10-15 minutes and then she'll pop back towards the end to make sure that all of your questions are answered. If you've got any questions for me in regards to anything that we've covered so far, anything that you're worried about in terms of English, or anything that you would like me to do, anything you would like me to consider putting in, making things more exciting for you guys, then please do shout at me so I can address any of those issues. If you guys don't know me, if you haven't been to one of these sessions before or you've forgotten who I am, I'm Vicki. So I did English language and linguistics as my undergrad at York, then I trained as a teacher at York as well, and I've done over 350 lessons with my tutors since September, so I'm a busy bee. Right, okay, so let us get cracking. So as always, if you've got questions, can you pop them in the Q&A for me or the chat? Generally I check the chat more, just because it's the more popular one. Right, okay, so learning objectives this morning then, to apply knowledge of terminology to the poem London. So I think we're getting really good at all the terminology that we could use in terms of poetry specific and just generally that we could use in other areas, i.e. fiction, non-fiction, which we could use in our language papers. And to understand the social message behind London. London is an incredibly political poem, and it is brilliantly written. It's fantastic, and the nice thing about it is it's quite bite-sized. It's only 4 stanzas, so it's really nice. Right, okay, so what do we know about poetry so far? So I've got a Slido for you guys this morning. So it is a word cloud poll, so I would like you guys to pop in anything at all that springs to your mind when I say what on earth is poetry. So that could be terminology, that could be ideas, the way we analyse things, anything at all. I'm putting that link in the chat for you guys. I'll put it in the Q&A as well. Oh no, I can't put it in the Q&A. It's in the chat for you guys. So absolutely anything you know about poetry. So anything at all really, just as a refresh, because we only do poetry once a week, so just to get us cracking for this morning, a little starter just to refresh ourselves. So it could be poetry specific language, or it could be something sort of just general in terms of terminology. So we've got sometimes used as a theme of war. Yeah, absolutely. So we've been looking at the Power and Conflict bundle on AQA at the moment. So a lot of them do have themes of war, because we're in the Power and Conflicts. You don't see much of that in love and relationships. Hence, you get quite a lot of war poetry, and I think war poetry is always fantastic. So what have we got in terms of war? We have got Charge of the Light Brigade, Exposure, Bayonet Charge, Remains, Poppies, War Photographer, and Kamikaze. So a huge amount are all based around war. Yep, rhyme, absolutely fantastic. Let's have some more of you hopping over there, please. So the link is just above where you said I have not got it. So if you just click on that link, it should take you to it, or you can use the QR code, or you can go to slido.com, and then there's the thingy there which you can't see, which isn't very helpful. There you go. The number is 11260. Rhyme, yes, caesura, enjambment, stanzas, lots of linguistic devices which make it interesting. If you've got any questions for me generally, can you put them in the Q&A rather than here? So today I'm just going to do a quiz at the end, just so we're not doing the same thing all the time. essentially. I want you guys to have freshness. So essentially this is just a recap. We'll do a quiz at the end, so don't worry, you will be getting a quiz. London poem shows devastation of people who are poor. Absolutely, that's really nice. Fabulous. Bombing, death, yeah, love, defense, money, yeah, so we've come up with a lot of stuff. So I assume you're asking why, as in why I'm not doing a quiz, because I've got a lot to cover today and I don't want to do two quizzes both at the start and finish that are the same quiz. I know it's great to track progress, and I will do it next week for you. I will have one of those, but quizzes take a lot of time essentially, and I've got a lot to get through today. Right, attack, yeah, is another theme. So we've got lots of themes coming up. Trench. I'm just going to ignore that we need a quiz at the start and the end. I've answered that question. Right, fabulous. We've got lots of things going on there, so I'm going to close that one down, get rid of that. Right, so let's have a crack at London then. So, came up with absolutely loads of stuff there. Right, so Blake is a super interesting man, really interesting. So his dates there are 1757 to 1827. So he lived quite long for that time period. He was religious, which was Christianity was incredibly popular, incredibly big at this time period. He claimed he had experiences and visions, and he claimed that he'd seen God and had religious experiences, really sort of interesting ideas. And then when his brother passed away, he claims that he saw his spirit being freed after he died, which is odd. We've got, he's married to an illiterate wife and taught her how to read and write, which is absolutely fantastic. So when they got married, she signed her name with a cross on her marriage certificate, because that's what people did when they couldn't write. They just signed with a cross, which obviously was a quite big problem, because anybody could be signing with a cross. It's difficult to identify a person. He had unpopular opinions about politics, religion, and the psyche. So he was quite outspoken, but he wasn't recognised in his time, and his poetry didn't really take off until after his death. So quite sad really, because I think he's absolutely fantastic. Oh, I've closed the Slido down, Olivia. I'll come back to it at the end though for you, if I can open it up. I'll come back to it at the end. Remind me though, because I've got a head like a sieve. Right, so little bit about William Blake. Now, this London is from a collection of poems written by Blake called Songs of Innocence and of Experience. So it is an absolutely fantastic read. I appreciate it is poems, but I think it's probably my favourite collection of poems. And it's absolutely beautiful as well. So this is the Tate Art Gallery's edition. So it was, I think it was only £10, and it looks much more expensive than £10, I think. So what's really interesting about Blake is that he was an artist as well. So he did what we call illuminations. So each poem, I think it's each poem, looks like each poem. As you can see there, he's painted all of this and then written his poem onto the illumination. So they're absolutely gorgeous. So let me find you London. So London is 46. So this is what London's looks like. It is absolutely stunning. What is really nice about these is that it gives you a little bit extra information. Essentially, you've got visuals. The other thing to mention is that London is from Songs of Experience. So this is set into two portions. I can't remember how many poems are in each one. It's something like 23. Yeah, something along those lines, about 20 poems for each one. So the first one obviously focuses mainly on the theme of innocence, and then the second part focuses on experience. You can see all my scribbling on there. So if you're interested in Blake, if you're interested in doing sort of A-level or just looking at a few of his other poems, I think this edition is fantastic because you get the illuminations. I really recommend even just looking up a few of his illuminations. And as I mentioned last week, if you're thinking, I really want to do A-level, this is one of the most popular poetry collections done at A-level. So if you're thinking, I fancy having a go at A-level, it's quite likely you might be studying the entirety of Songs of Innocence. It's relatively thick. So might be a good place to start if you're sort of on the fence or you're really keen and want to get ahead. That would be a good place to start. And I showed you guys this last week. So this is Blake's, or not autobiography, biography, written by Peter Ackroyd. It is incredibly dense, and the text is, I'd say it's relatively hard going. I definitely find it hard going. So yeah, if you're a really, really keen bean and you are really interested in Blake, this is the best place to go, I think. Right, okay. So Romanticism then. So who's writing in the Romantic era? So I've sort of summarised it really quickly in 3 bullet points for you. So it was something that was happening in Europe. So before we had Romanticism, everything was relatively objective. We weren't sort of expressing our opinions. We weren't interpreting things in alternative ways, essentially. It was all very, very sort of factual, essentially. The other really nice thing about it is that generally we have radical political ideologies. So that's something that we really see in Blake. So you will find that, and in London, that he is quite outspoken, and he is usually the voice for people who are suffering, which is really nice, which we will see in London, and we'll sort of work that out as we go along. So features that we might see. So this is where we really started to get emotions and imagination coming into our texts. Very self-expressive. London, I don't think is self-expressive personally, but a lot of his other things are. A lot of his other poems are. Responses to nature as well. Again, London doesn't really have that. Visions of childhood, you find a lot of that in Songs of Innocence, and we talk a little bit about childhood in London, referencing to ancient ballads and folk songs, which Blake does do. I can't remember what it is. I think The Echoing Green, I think it is. That is a reference to a folk song, and looking at the outcasts of society, so looking at beggars, people in poverty, which definitely comes into London, and poets can almost be like a prophet. They can almost sort of give sort of what they think might be in the future, essentially. Right, let's quickly look at the chat. Right, I took English language A-level. I didn't take literature. Reason being because I didn't think I was going to be an English teacher. So hence why I only took language. I really wish I had done literature. I've taught A-level literature because I've got a degree in English. But yeah, I totally recommend it. Love it. Right. Okay, Olivia, so you've gone. I will go back to previous page yet whilst I'm answering Olivia's question. There you go. Right, so you've gone on to my tutor page, wanted to book some slots, but your page wouldn't let me. When did you do that, Olivia? Because my status was unavailable because I've been quite busy. But I've now changed it, so I think you should be able to, a few days ago. Yeah, so if you look at it now, you should be able to get in contact with me. I've changed my status. Fabulous. Right. So let's quickly talk a little about libertarianism. So essentially it means being liberal. So it's saying that there should be minimal intervention by the government. We should essentially be able to do what we want to do, but we need to be respectful to each other. Something which we see in Blake. So Blake felt that if you wanted to get married, that was fine. He was married and had a very happy marriage. I think they were married for a ridiculous amount of time, maybe like something like 40, 50 years. I think she died first. But if you didn't want to get married, that was absolutely fine as well. So it's something that was really sort of very much frowned upon at that time period. So yeah, basically sort of saying everyone should be able to do what they want to do and be happy, but we shouldn't be hurting other people, essentially. So yeah, feeling that there should be less control from the government, the ruling authorities, the monarchy, that sort of thing. So it is the idea that we need to make our own decisions, that we should be responsible, that we are moral agents. So this is sort of going on to philosophy a little bit. So moral agents meaning that we have a conscience and we should know what is right and wrong. Therefore, we should be able to decide what we can do with our freedom, our liberty, and our property. That we should respect the rights of others, but in the cases where we really violate that, law can come in and stop somebody from being disruptive to a happy community, essentially. Quite a lot to take in. We're going to do a quiz at the end. Don't worry, there will be a quiz. I promise you there will be a quiz. I'm going to do one on word classes today. So I picked out a load of words from London. And I'm going to test you because some of them are slightly trickier because it's sort of slightly old language stuff that we don't necessarily use so much anymore, some vocabulary that's gone a little bit out of fashion. Right. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that a different colour? Right. Okay, so London then. Really nice in the fact that it is only 4 stanzas. So in terms of poetry, and you guys have to remember loads and loads of stuff. So I think London's a really nice one because it's relatively short. Whereas you've got other really long ones like My Last Duchess and Checking Out My History, where there's a lot of stuff for you guys to remember, particularly in each poem. But when you've got to go learn the entire bundle, really tricky. Right, so let's plug in my graphics tablet. So feel free to shout out any features or anything which you think is interesting analysis. More than welcome to hear your ideas, thoughts, and so on. Yes, Emma, straight in. So uses anaphora in every, oxymoron in marriage hearse. Absolutely fantastic stuff. You've beaten me to 2 stanzas already. Fantastic work, Emma. Right, so where's my pen? Here we go. I'm in a dancey sort of mood today. I don't know why. Right, okay. I think I might be going slightly mad. Right, if I wasn't already. So, I wander through each chartered street. Can anyone tell me what chartered means? So it's repeated. So we've got it here, and we've got it here. So there's quite a few little pieces of repetition going on. So anyone know what chartered means? Keep forgetting I haven't got my mouse plugged in. Old, broken. There are a couple of of definitions for chartered, but that's not the right one for this one. People are getting in with rhyme scheme and all sorts already. Right, okay. So chartered means the rights and privileges and sort of how a government rules. So it's referring to London being governed quite strictly, essentially. So that's, I suppose we could say, connotations there. Of repression, I would say. A lot of this is about the repression of the poor, not listening to them, thinking that they are expendable, essentially. Yeah, absolutely. Being confined within the city limits. Yeah, absolutely, Emma. That's really nicely put. Right, so near where the chartered Thames does flow. So this is a really interesting way of putting it. So chartered obviously isn't ruled by the government. The Thames isn't ruled by the government. The Thames just moves as it does. It's free, essentially. So it's a really interesting use of chartered. So some of you guys have already got in there with the rhyming scheme. So we've got A, and B, B. So, and mark in every, I can't work out, is that face I meet? It is face. A mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woes. So we've got a triplet, and we've got marks repeated. So that is a metaphor. So a metaphor for being able to see the sort of strain of life on their face caused by the repression caused from the poverty. You guys are absolutely storming the chat this morning. Right. Loads of rhyme, yeah. Sibilant soldier sigh, absolutely haven't got there. You guys are beating me to it. How many people are here to take a question? 26 of you, which is lovely. So a little less than usual. Right, I will answer that question about finding someone specific on MyTutor in a minute. Right, yeah. Okay, let's move on to next stanza. So, in every cry of every man. So, I think Emma said that we've got anaphora. So, in every. So that's a type of repetition. Fabulous. We've got the repetition of cry. So I'll just put rep for that. We know what that means. Then we've got our rhyming scheme. So we've got man. Oh, let's change that. Here and fear and here. Lovely. We've got a nice little pause here as well. So we could say that that is a caesura. Right. So who are we talking about here? So in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, every ban. What do you think the political point is he's trying to get across? Right, so anaphora is a repetition of one or two, repetition of two words that starts of, not necessarily starts of lines, but repetitions of a phrase essentially, which goes on. Yep. So metaphor on line 4, absolutely. Fabulous stuff. Right. So he's trying to convey universality, yeah? So everybody is suffering, from the grown men to children. So this is the first mention of innocence here. So you'll see throughout this, there's a theme of innocence, a theme of children. While the motif is children, the theme is innocence. So the mind-forged manacles I hear. Can anybody tell me what on earth that means? Because I think that's super tricky. So it's a metaphor. You might want to tackle it in 2 parts. So mind-forged as one, and then manacles, and then add them together. Sound of horror heard. Mind-forged manacles I hear. Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely say that. Mind-forged manacles I hear. Is that what we're suggesting for personification? Mind-forged manacles I fear. Okay. Right, so mind-forged then. So some for the other line. Okay, thank you, Olivia. Thank you for being so interactive as well. It's really nice to see. Okay, so mind-forged manacles I hear. Right, so mind-forged, created in the mind mentally. So it's a representation for being oppressed, being forgotten by society. Manacles are, can I get up? I never know how to get rid of this banner. No, I won't get it up. I'm scared I'm going to do something and ruin everything. Right, so manacles are a sort of old, out-of-date version of handcuffs. So usually made out of leather. So I'm trying to think when they sort of went out of fashion. I think you'd still see them in the early Victorian era, but something we just use metal now. Creating mental prisons, yeah, social and political, forgetting about them, yeah, absolutely. So they're expendable, they're dispensable. It doesn't matter, essentially. Yeah, absolutely. Right, how the chimney sweepers cry. So we've got another bit of repetition here. Every blackening church appalls. Can anyone tell me what appalls means? Yeah, so shocks, yeah, absolutely. So appalls is it's a word that we don't use anymore. So yeah, horror, nastiness, right. So every blackening church, so we've got blackening here as well. So I think that's sort of, I think that's definitely metaphorical for sort of, you know, black and white, light and dark, it being a very deep, depressing time for these people. Church is spelt with a capital C. What do you think that means? So church with a capital C and church without a capital. What's the difference between the two? Right, so they are both nouns. You're absolutely right, and it is an important noun. So this one is a proper noun. So it's got a capital letter because it's referring to the organisation of the church. So you're talking about everybody who works within the church, who sort of runs and makes sure everything is working correctly. So that could be administrators, that could be bishops, that could be vicars, anyone who essentially is a cog within the Christian church within a country or across a few countries or continents. They're the one essentially making the decisions. So the Pope is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. So in that sense, he's the one who sort of makes the big announcements, decisions if something changes, essentially, if they want to create a standpoint on something. If it's just a little c, if it's not a capital letter, it's just referring to a church as in a building. So that's the difference between the two, but it's very easily forgotten. Is every church blackening a Paul's personification as it gives, giving the church human characteristics? Yeah, I'll give you that one. Because the church is an organisation which is made up of people. So no, if it was a church as in a specific church, a building, then yes. Because it's referring to the church as an organisation which is made up of a number of people, then I would say no. So he's attacking the church here, the church's decision, because he feels that the church is abandoning people who are in poverty. What's really interesting, though, is that he had loads of religious experiences. He was a religious man, but he didn't agree with the church as an organisation, and felt things needed to be more liberal, that there needed to be more wiggle room. So I think that's a really interesting standpoint. But doesn't mention people. No, you're right, it doesn't mention people. But the church as in the organisation is a group of people, essentially. So although it doesn't mention it overtly, it does mention it implicitly, if you get what I mean, although it's really tricky and I understand why you're questioning it, so don't worry too much. Don't worry about it too much. We're thinking in really, really heavy detail there. Right, okay, the hapless soldier's sigh. So absolutely right, I think Olivia's been telling me that for quite some time, which is sibilance. That doesn't, no, fabulous, sibilance, yeah, it's a soldier's sigh. So he's saying, you know, soldiers are quite unhappy, they're quite fed up, runs in blood down the palace walls. So again, we've got a metaphor. So obviously sighs can't actually run in blood down the palace walls. So the idea that, so the palace walls will be referring to where the king resides, and he is saying that the king essentially has blood on his hands for accepting that war is a good thing, sending his soldiers out to war. And Blake doesn't feel that that is the right thing to do. Yeah, don't worry, I've just moved it up. Right. What's the two types of church, like the rich and the poor? What do you mean by the two types of churches? I'm not quite sure what you mean there. So, like a rich and a poor. I'm not quite sure. Can you clear that up for me and I'll answer it for you? Whoops, what's going on here? Right. Okay, last stanza then. So, we haven't done our rhyming scheme. So, let's just double check we haven't had the I sound come up yet. No. Right. So we've got E, E, F and F, and then we've got G, G, H, H. Okay, but most through midnight streets, what I didn't pick out, chimney sweepers cry, so that's referring to children as well. So we've got that motif of children there. But most through midnight streets I hear, go away. Yeah, so there is repetition of here, there, but it wouldn't be anaphora, because anaphora needs to be more than one word. How the youthful harlots curse, so harlot means a prostitute, and youthful, so we're suggesting that probably these are quite young women, probably in their teenage years. So sort of younger than me, sort of maybe around your guys' age, which sounds horrible. So the suggestion there is that these poor people are having to turn to prostitution in order to survive, in order to have any sort of income, any sort of money. And then it says, how the newborn infant blasts the newborn infant's tear. So that's referring to the harlot, the prostitute, this young lady has a child that she has to feed, and that might be why she's had to turn to the lifestyle that she's got, which is super sad. And then we've got on blights with plagues, the marriage hearse. So somebody already told me that that was an oxymoron. We've got more talk of innocence here. So newborn infants, and we've got youthful. So marriage hearse. So marriage we generally suggest is a really positive thing. As I said, Blake was married, but Blake believed that if you didn't want to get married, that was completely fine. You should make your own choices. Whereas at the time, you had to get married. Right, hearse. So a hearse is a funeral car. It's what transports you in a coffin to your funeral for a church service usually. So we've got two ends of the scale. Marriage we suggest as Christian ceremony, which is incredibly happy, and a funeral being something which is incredibly sad. So hearses have changed slightly. So at this time period, a hearse would have been a horse and carriage. Now we just generally have really long cars, don't we? Black cars. Occasionally you do see the odd horse and carriage. Generally, I've seen a couple on the news, and it's generally for young children, and the funeral parlour directors have said we will give you this for free, because they've been really influential and they've done really good work for charities in their short lives. That's really the only time we see it. The other thing is when someone in the royal family dies as well. their coffin is transported on the back of a horse and carriage, and then it usually gets transported to a hearse where they go have the private ceremony afterwards. If you watch Princess Diana's funeral, you'll see sort of the magnitude that is and what it looks like. Right, okay, so I feel like we've covered loads and loads of stuff already. So yeah, you could have anaphora if it's I hear. Yeah, absolutely, Olivia. Well done for mentioning. Were the different churches judged on their hierarchy? Right, be careful how you're spelling hierarchy. So that's how you spell hierarchy. So, good question, and I don't really know. I imagine the Roman Catholic Church at this time period would have had a lot more following, because obviously our denomination of Christianity is Church of England, so you can really only be C of E if you live in the UK. However, so Catholicism would have been a lot more popular and have been going for much more time. So I don't know. I mean, we changed. Henry VIII created the Church of England because he wanted to get divorced, and the Pope said no. So that was around 1520 something, I think. So difficult answer. I wouldn't really worry about it too much because it doesn't really matter in this case. But church, the different types of church that I've been talking about is churches in the organisation. So, for example, the head of our church is the Queen, and when she dies, it will be Prince Charles. And church is in just a building, so don't worry about it too much. It doesn't really matter. Right. Okay. So, where have we got to with this? Right. So, what I was going to do is I was going to have a go at exploding the quotes, but I'm a little bit worried about the time that we've got. So what I will do is I will show you the question. So, how does Blake represent the lives of those he witnesses, and what are his opinions of the world? So that's the question I'm going to be answering. Obviously, you guys have to compare with another poem, but it is really, really difficult to do all of that in one lesson because there's different poems that go together with different things. I'll give you some suggestions as to what sort of poems you might want to use. Right, okay, so first off, before we get cracking on that though, what is Blake's political message? What is the takeaway point? Why has he written this poem? I'm going to answer the MyTutor question when I get to the end, when I finish teaching. Don't worry, I will answer it, but I'm answering it in the Q&A section. We haven't got there yet. We haven't got to the A section. We haven't got to the... So don't worry about it. Political messages show how people don't have as much and are being treated poorly. Yeah, distress and injustice. Yeah, absolutely. So feeling that the working lower class are being forgotten and they are really suffering, whilst the upper class, we didn't really have a middle class in that time period. It was either you had a lot of money or you didn't. So yeah, there was a huge divide, and basically Blake was saying it is your responsibility as people with money to make sure that these atrocities aren't happening, essentially. Right. So this is my model answer for you guys. Someone just popped up a question. Inform others about slavery, oppose monarchy, organised relation. Yeah, there isn't actually any slavery mentioned in this. So be careful with that one. But yeah, absolutely with the other ones. Right, okay, so I haven't done a flatters table today just because I wanted to spend time just really going through it with a fine-tooth comb rather than worrying about putting everything onto a table, but you absolutely can do that and it's a good idea for revision purposes. Right, okay. Blake presents a strong dislike for the way in which the government and authorities have repressed London. I wandered through each chartered street. The adjective chartered can be defined as a governing body ruling an area for their advantage only. Therefore, there is a lack of care for the lower working class in society. By using the determiner each, Blake demonstrates that the control is something which is inescapable in London. This makes the reader feel empathy for those who are not considered by the ruling authority, as their lives, one might assume, are miserable. So I've given a relatively sort of political point, then some evidence, looked in it in a little bit more detail, and then sort of looking at the takeaway points. So my analysis is sort of word level analysis, then sort of zooming out back into the sort of phrase level, sentence level analysis, and then sort of giving my opinions on it. Right, the poet continues to attack the government by highlighting not just poverty, but extreme poverty suffered by children. Chimney sweepers cry. This informs the reader that young boys have been forced to go to work as well as working in dangerous conditions. This links back to the first collection of poems, the Songs of Innocence. So I do really recommend going and have a little look at a couple of the poems, or perhaps just sort of having a bit of a Google about what he's trying to get across in Songs of Innocence, in which Blake highlights the innocence of children. However, in this poem, Blake uses vivid imagery to explain to the reader that children being free and innocent can be idealistic in the time period he was writing in. Further evidence is added. Right, so I've done my point, I've done my evidence, and I've done my analysis, and I'm talking about context, and I'm talking about the wide picture when I'm talking about sort of more than just the one poem. I'm talking about it in sort of the grand scale, essentially. Then I'm going to go on and provide further evidence for how he creates poverty within children and why he bothers to emphasise it. Right, further evidence is added to this by the writer Youthful Harlot's Cry. By labelling the harlot as youthful, Blake is once again able to show the loss of innocence in the young. In some cases, it appears that the only way some young women suffering from poverty can survive is to turn to prostitution. So that's an inference, and I'm being tentative with it. So I'm saying it appears, but it might not be, essentially. By focusing on the vulnerable and young, Blake is able to demonstrate his allegorical message. So remember, allegory means political message. Those in power should be tackling and helping those in poverty, especially children. Blake is also able to establish a scale of the social crisis by using the anaphora in every. This directly tells the reader about the universality of the issue and how pressing a need for change is. In every cry of every man repeats the idea that the situation is inescapable for all, and they are united in one problem, poverty. So I'm repeatedly talking about that theme because it is so integral and so important. The inhabitants of London are severely limited by their class, as the rulers of the country have enabled mind-forged manacles to be created. This suggests that the working class population believe they are incredibly restricted. The use of the metaphor shows that people believe they are trapped in their current situation and no longer have any hope. Effectively, they're become imprisoned. So I've talked about linking words there. So in prison and manacles would be in the same semantic field because they link together. Blake furthers his attack on the government's agenda by conveying how appalled he is with their choices, runs in blood down the palace walls. This metaphor suggests that although the monarchy have an army to fight their battles, the decision that they make lie with them. Here the poet implies that war is unnecessary and sending men to their deaths should prompt a huge sense of guilt in the monarchy, therefore demonstrating his libertarian background. So again, looking at the bigger picture, don't worry too much if you forget about libertarian, but I think it's an interesting background fact to know. Righty-roo. Right, so let's just check what you guys popped up. Yeah, it's somber, morbid, absolutely reflects his dissatisfaction, absolutely. Right, okay, so I will pop the quiz up. I think I've looked at everything that I had up. I think somebody wanted me to pop back quickly to, was it libertarian features? Libertarian, rather. Or was it romanticism? Questions, right, so MyTutor question. Can't find you, it doesn't give you option typing in someone's name. Right, so yeah, it doesn't. I find a way around it, just because I'm nosy and I like to look at my own profile just to make sure everything's all okay. So if you type in to a search engine, MyTutor, Vicki E, then my profile should pop up. That works for me. So you don't need my last name, because we don't use our last names on our profiles. But my last name ends in an E, and I've spelled Vicki, V-I-C-K-I, not with a Y. So you should be able to find me through that, hopefully, if you want to get in touch with me for private tuition. Okay. Sorry, guys. Right, let's get cracking with this quiz then. So I've gone for quizzes today, just so I think it's nice because you guys can hop on a bit easier, sort of in increments. So I'll pop the code in the chat. So why aren't you letting me type? So we're going for joinmyquiz.com, and that is the game pin. There you go. So we've got a couple of you hopping on. Oh, we've got 32 of you now. We've had some late covers. What's not working? Is the code not working? It should do. Other people are popping on. Yeah, I'll go back to the slide after who is Blake. Absolutely. If you've got any other questions, please fire them at me now so we've got time to answer them all. Emphasis of emotion slide. Yeah, and I'll go through it again. Right, so I'll start this off and then hopefully we will have a little bit of time at the end. And hopefully I'll have time to put to the Slido for you as well. I'll put the music on for you. So something to note. So when you get in your exam, you can absolutely say, you've seen I do it a lot, saying the adjective chartered suggests this. You can just say the words, that is fine, but if you want to throw in a bit of bonus terminology, great. Hence why I've been sort of testing you on word classes a little bit, because it's something we do loads and loads at Key Stage 2, and then we sort of tend to forget at high school because it's not something we do as much. But it's a nice little bit of bonus terminology. Don't feel like you have every phrase that you put in as a quotation you have to say the adjective this does such and such, because it gets really boring if you do that. But if you do it occasionally, so sort of like sprinkling like a little bit of glitter essentially onto a cake rather than pouring the entire pot of glitter, then I think it works really nice, and it's a nice little balance, and it's just an extra little bit of showing off. Showing off is always good in an exam. Whilst you guys are doing that, I'll also let you know what we're doing next week. Actually, can I let you know what we're doing next week? I can't remember. So I'll see if I can get it up. Tuesday, we are definitely doing part 2, tips, tricks, how to answer each individual questions, what sort of things you need to be doing, what assessment objectives you're answering, all of that shebang. Ah, that's helpful. I'm just getting it through on my emails so I can tell you guys. Right. And then Thursday, we're doing Checking Out My History by John Agard. So we've already looked at Half Caste by him for the unseen poetry. So that's going to stand us in really good stead. And then we are doing some unseen poetry analysis. So we're looking at autumn and today for unseen. I really love doing unseen. It's probably my favourite on the literature papers. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. Right, most of you guys are getting to the end of that. So it's really nice to see that you guys are doing relatively well. I've got a couple of you on, so I've got PC and Louise who've got 10 out of 10, which is lovely. Then at the moment we've got Bro, Katie, Slinky, Jania. If I'm saying Jania or Yania, can you tell me which one it is? Because I feel really bad that I'm potentially pronouncing your name wrong. Emma, and then Vicki, very original, Summer and Olivia. Right, I'll leave that one running quickly. Jane, right, Jania, brilliant, thank you. Right, so was it this one, the romantic features you wanted to look at? I think. That's fine, Emma, don't worry. I'll leave it running for you guys in the background. And I will see if I can get that Slido up for you. So someone wanted to take a screenshot. So there you go. Hopefully that'll work for you. That's not helpful in the slightest, is it? Because people are misusing it. So I'm really sorry that some people have decided to misuse that and now you can't get what you wanted from it. I really apologise. I will ask those of you who have decided that instead of actually doing the activity, you've wanted to misuse it, don't. There's no point to it. I'm not going to change my lesson on the spot for you. So, I mean, it's nice to know that you want to do Kahoots and that you want to do quizzes at the start, at the end, and the end, but please be considerate and polite about what I am doing in my lessons, so that everyone can get the most out of it, because essentially that resource has now been ruined. So I'm really sorry to whoever asked for that as a screenshot, which is now useless, so I'm so sorry. Right, how are we doing over on the quizzes? Hopefully much better than on the Slido. Really disappointing. And the same goes for people actually who are using names like Tilly hired you. It's just not polite, it's not nice, and it's also not right. So can we please be a little bit more respectful? Is it the romanticism bullet point one that you wanted, lovely? I think it's the only bigger sort of bullet point one. Yeah. I think that's the one you want. Right. Let's have a look then. So I think everyone's pretty much finished. Right, so Isabella at first, then PC, Louise, Ambro, Emma, Katie, Z, is that an O? And then Tilly hired you, and Slinky. So well done to those of you today who have contributed and worked really hard. the vast majority of you are working really hard and taking the most of the opportunity that you guys have got. So it's really nice to say. The one before that one, is it that one that you wanted? So yeah, just be respectful, guys. But generally, you have been absolutely fantastic and worked really hard today. So it's just a shame that a small number have spoiled that. Right. Again, Olivia, really sorry about the Slido. But hopefully you did pick up the odd few things there. Right, brilliant. So yeah, did you want me to run through it again, Richard, or are you happy with just looking at the bullet points? I'm happy to run through it if you want me to quickly. We've got a few minutes if you wanted me to do that. Okay, absolutely fine, no worries. Right, so next week then, I don't think, give me a shout. Give me a shout if you've got any questions really quickly. So just recapping then, so next week we are doing paper 2, sort of a tips, tricks, how to, and sort of just generally looking at each individual question, what we need to be doing and how we can do it effectively with time management, those sorts of things. So sort of almost like the tips and tricks that I did when we were doing 4 sessions a week, when we were just looking at one question for the entire week. So that sort of thing will be coming your way on Tuesday. Then Thursday we're doing checking out my history. So John Agard is absolutely fantastic. And I think with the sort of Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, if you wanted to go and read poetry written by Black authors, John Agard, I think, is fantastic. And I mean, we looked at half cast, didn't we? And yeah, I think he's absolutely wonderful, and I think he's very thought-provoking, and I think he would be a brilliant person to go look at this time if you wanted to check out some literature. Right. What's my opinion on George Floyd? What? that's what happened was very wrong. I'm leaving it at that. It's completely irrelevant. It's nothing to do with English. Right. So fabulous stuff, guys. Thank you all so much for coming today, and the majority of you working really hard. I will see you all again on Tuesday for paper 2 question 2, and until then, have an absolutely fantastic weekend. Try and get some sun rays if we've got any sun coming. I haven't checked the weather forecast, and look after yourselves till then. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. Bye.